I'll tell you what. Whew. The bar is set high. We'll just. So, guys, we're doing a survival series, and we're going through the different bad guys of the Bible, and we're talking about surviving them. Today we're going to talk about surviving Jezebel. Jezebel was an evil king's wife, a queen of Israel. Terrible, terrible woman. That's not saying that this is a sermon against terrible women. I see James over there laughing. This is... Christy, get a hold of him. All right. So the whole point of the survival series is that there are these characters in the Bible that were terrible people and how they attack. Last week we looked at surviving Goliath. Today that is Jezebel. So we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 19. And so I want to set the stage of what's going on before we get to this passage because, of course, I don't get to preach for 3 hours, though I would love to. We would start at the very beginning of the story and go right through it, but we don't. And I want you guys to get something powerful today. So in 1 Kings chapter 17, I'm just going to kind of walk through the different major events that happened. Elijah tells King Ahab there's not going to be any rain or dew until I pray for it. That's what Elijah said. He goes, there's going to be a drought, and there's no rain, not even dew on the ground until I pray for it. There was not rain for 3.5 years, just to let you know. Right? 1 Kings chapter 18. Jezebel had then started killing the prophets of God. She's not happy about the drought. She's not happy about Elijah. She's not happy about all the things that God has got this judgment against Israel. In chapter 18, a man named Obadiah, one of the prophets, he hid 100 prophets. She didn't kill everybody. He hid 100 prophets, 50 in each cave. Later on, in chapter 18, Elijah runs into this prophet Obadiah, and he says, Obadiah, I need a meeting with King Ahab. So he has a meeting with King Ahab, where it's hilarious how King Ahab speaks to Elijah, and he says this, he says, is that you troubler of Israel? And I love Elijah because you got to think about this. Elijah's talking to a king. You got to remember that the kings and the power, the authority that they have, you're dead. You talk bad to me, I have the power to kill you. And King Ahab was not a good king to begin with. He says, you troubler of Israel. And I love how Elijah replied. He goes, I have not caused any trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. I'm not the trouble, it's you. And he goes on and he starts telling him, you have forsaken God. You've worshipped other idols. All of this drought's because of you. So he goes, I want you to summon all the people of Israel and tell them to meet me at Mount Carmel. I mean, the boldness that Elijah has here. You know that he's sent on mission with God. And he says, you know what? Get all the prophets of Baal. There's 450. Go get them all. Get all the children of Israel and meet me at Mount Carmel. That's what I want. Meet me there. So what they do is they meet there. And what I love about how Elijah confronts the people of Israel, he says, how long are you going to waver between the two opinions here? How long are you going to waver between whether you want to worship God or whether you want to worship Baal? They didn't say anything. Remember, there's 450 prophets of Baal and there's one standing prophet for God. The tables look turned, don't they? Can you imagine being in that situation? Even as a part of the congregation, you showed up and then you want to say, go God, But then at the same time, there's 450 prophets that are going to mark you down because they've been killing people who believed in God. So you say, make a statement, you better make sure that your side wins, right? So no one says anything. He goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. They're going to offer a sacrifice. And I'm going to offer a sacrifice. And if God of Israel, our God, if the one true living God, whichever God answers with fire, he's God. And the people said, this sounds great. Takes the pressure off of us making a stand, and we'll just let God decide. Here's what's amazing. So, and I love Elijah because Elijah has a little bit of built-in sarcasm. Anybody's like first language is sarcasm? I already know it's James over here, but anybody else with me? And Scott Drake, come on, you didn't even raise your hand. I know that you speak sarcasm. You're fluent there. And so, like Elijah's sarcastic. So what happens is 450. So, of course, they're worshiping a false god. So they sacrifice their sacrifice, they put it on their own altar, and nothing happens. So Elijah says, hey, maybe your God is sleeping. Maybe you need to get a little louder. Maybe he can't hear you. Maybe he's busy. So, I mean, can you imagine this guy being sarcastic over that, you're up next, buddy, But anyway, so he's like, hey. And so then they began to cut themselves, and they spent the whole day, and nothing happened. And then he says, okay, your turn's over. He gets up and he goes, now I want to get 12 barrels of water. What happens when you put 12 barrels of water on top of wood that you're wanting to catch a campfire? Yeah, it ain't going to happen, right? I mean, you pour 12 barrels of water, not little tiny buckets. It's not like, hey, little no, I mean, you're talking about bring water. And 12, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, he says, I want you to doubt. I want there to be no question of what's about to happen today. He says one short prayer, God, and then God sends down fire, consumes it. I mean, it means that the fire from heaven came down and consumed it. There's nothing left. It even says that the fire licked up and consumed all the water draining around. I mean, God was like, no, this isn't a little light. This is fire. So what happens then all of a sudden? So all the people cheer. Well, God is God. Well, duh. Come on now. So God is God. So then what happens? He goes, now I want you to seize these 450 prophets and put them to death. So all the prophets of Baal die that one day. What a victory. He then says, King Ahab, not only this, but I'm going to pray for water, for rain. So he prays and rain comes. And it even then says that they were so excited about the rain, King Ahab's in a chariot led by horses and they're running. And it says God girded up his loin and allowed him to outrun a chariot to town. Outruns the chariot. Now, this is pretty remarkable, right? When you start thinking about, man, can you imagine what it would have been like to you said a prayer and then all of a sudden God answers with fire in front of everybody? You would have probably felt like, whoo, feeling pretty good, right? I mean, right? You just won. But a lot of times what we forget is that right after you win, you have that victory that a lot of times we don't realize that the battle doesn't stop fighting just because we won. That we think that it's over and nothing happens next. And I'm here to tell you, what happens next for him is probably the hardest part. So where we kind of pick up in our story is going to be in the turning point here. The turning point of where everything begins, where we really see what happens with Elijah. So I want you to understand Elijah, a powerful man of God, God used in mighty, mighty ways. I mean, this was a huge turning point for Israel. So imagine this, everybody that showed up, the entire nation of Israel, no one was cheering for God until God won. But remember that all 450 prophets of Baal are now gone, so there's nobody there. Now, only people who are left is God's people. They changed. There was like a revival in that moment. So everything looks like it's turned. It looked like there was this huge turning point. But then what happens next is then it kind of looks like it just... Have you ever made that turn? You turned around to God in that moment. It was like amazing. And then as fast as you turned around for God, you turned right back around and fell back on your face again. How many of you have done that? Probably everyone that's being honest. All right, good. All right, so I was going to say, most every one of us is like, yes, God! Sunday morning, 11:20, we're like, amen, amen. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, I'm done with everything, right? Come on now. Let's be honest, right? So here's the thing, this is the turning point. So here's what happens. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 3. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. King Ahab's like, man, you should have sinned there. He's up there, fire came down from heaven, and then he killed all of your prophets. Oh, man. So, can you imagine? Because, he didn't care. He was just excited. There's rain, everything. You should have seen Elijah. And then all of a sudden he goes, oh, yeah, she hates him. So now he's in the doghouse. So Elijah, all that Elijah had done, also how he executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah. So this is Jezebel, where she enters the story. So let the gods do to me. What gods? I mean, that's the first thing. When I read this, I'm sitting here going, are you kidding me? What gods? Your God didn't even show up to the one test he had. Sometimes we give more weight to what the enemy is saying than what's actually there. May the gods do to me, and more so, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. 24 hours, you're dead. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. So what I want to do is first talk about what Jezebel represents. See, we're going to survive. We're going to learn how today to survive Jezebel. So what is Jezebel to you? Here's what Jezebel represents. She's everything that wants to destroy godliness. And see, what godliness is the parts where we are striving to, like, we're supposed to imitate Christ, right? Be ye imitators of Christ. So any part of my life that is imitating Christ, she wants to destroy it. Anything that looks like God, she wants to destroy. And I want you to understand, she's got a pretty good track record. So she wants to destroy your marriage. She wants to destroy your walk with God. She wants to destroy your joy, your peace. She wants to destroy any kind of a career that would resemble a Christian walk at all. But I want you to also know that her track record was pretty strong of trying to destroy anything that looked like God. See, here's the thing, is she made a mockery of marriage. And I'm going to tell you how, because she worshiped Baal, and one of the things that they did when they worshiped Baal was they would sleep with each other. I mean, all of the false worshiping gods was all about having sex in the temple. So it was just a bunch of people having sex with each other. So she made a mockery of God's imagery of what marriage was supposed to be about. She made a mockery of it. She made a mockery of the family even when it came to children. And when you worshiped Baal, you would sacrifice children as burnt offerings to please him. She mocked God's idea of the home. She sought to kill all the prophets of God. She failed. And she would try to kill anybody that gets in her way. That's who Jezebel is. Anybody, anything that wants to destroy you. Wants to destroy your family, wants to destroy whatever that is. So in verse 4, 1 Kings 19, verse 4, it says this, but he himself went a day's journey. A day's journey. Do you guys catch that? What did she, you remember what she said? If I don't kill you by this, may the gods do to me. May they destroy me and make me dead like one of these prophets if I don't kill you by this time tomorrow. How far did he go? A day's journey. She already lost. She lost a whole bunch of times. One, all of her prophets are gone. So the God that she's calling upon didn't show up to the one time he should have. And now she's saying, I'm going to kill you in 24 hours. He ran 24 hours. Isn't that interesting? Right? But look at what happens to him. I want you to start seeing the change, the turning point in his. He had all these victories in the Lord, and I want you to watch and see what begins to happen to himself. This is what discouragement, depression, fear does to you. He went to a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. Have you ever been that low yet? Have you ever been that low in life where I just want to die? He says, it's enough. Have you ever got to a place in your life where like, God, it's enough, I'm done? Right? I mean, most of us, maybe not to the point of maybe where you may never have considered suicide, maybe you have, but there's been points in our lives where, God, I'm done with this. Anybody ever been done? I am done. I want to throw in the towel. I'm done. So he says, it's enough, Lord. Now make my life, I'm no better than my father's. Then, as he lay and he slept under the broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate, he drank, and he lay back down. The angel came back a second time, touched him again, and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." So he arose, he ate, drank, and then he went in the strength of that food 40 days, 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. This is where he went wrong. You see, the key to surviving Jezebel is the rest that God gives us. God gave him rest, but what you do after that rest is going to decide whether you're running or hiding or whether you're facing your enemy. You can run from your enemy, you can hide from your enemy, or you can face your enemy. You see, resting, God gives us rest so that you can face your enemy, not so that you can run. You see, David faced Goliath, even running to him, not from him. See, a lot of times what I find in our lives today is how often we run from our troubles. Is there any runners in the house? All of a sudden my daughters are like, that's not, yes, that's okay. Chloe's like, yes, Dad's talking about running. She goes, Dad, will you use me in a sermon one of these days? And I'm like, yes. And so, yes, but not that kind of running. This is the kind of running from our troubles. Now, if you ever ran from your troubles, you're running pretty fast. You'd run pretty good. But that's not what we want to do in this case. We don't want to run from our troubles. But how many of us do that, right? How many of us, man, life's getting tough, job's getting tough, I'm quitting, I'm running, right? I mean, that's because that's what we do. If it gets too hard, we run. When we think we can't win, we quit. Isn't that kind of I hate to say it, but the American way, kind of, isn't it? Kind of how we act and live today. If it's too hard, I just quit. If it's not, if I look like I'm not going to make it out, I'm just going to go ahead and quit. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to run away. You see, God's going to give you rest. I want to read this passage to you. I love it. Isaiah 40. You guys have probably heard this in verse 30. Even youths shall faint and be weary. The young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord, those who wait on the Lord. Hear me. Those who wait on the Lord. So there's a time in your life when you don't know left from right. You're going to find yourself in that place. I don't know which way to go. I don't know if I'm supposed to go or whether I'm supposed to stay. I don't know if I'm going left or if I'm going right. God, I don't know. Then wait on the Lord. You wait on Him. He'll show you. He'll direct you. You got to wait on Him. You wait on the Lord. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. What he's saying is when you wait on God, He'll give you the strength to do what He wants you to do. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. Have you ever just seen one of those amazing, beautiful bald eagles just soaring over, and it's just like they just look untouchable? Have you ever seen that? That's what he's talking about. He's saying, when you wait on the Lord and God gives you strength, you're going to soar above your problems. You're going to soar over those obstacles that you thought were undefeatable. They shall run and not be weary like Elijah. They shall walk and not faint. You see, when God gives you rest, what I want to ask you, this is an important question because a lot of us handle rest differently. And many of you men, especially, would fit into the department of workaholics. Why is everybody looking at the ground and not making... Why can't you make eye contact with me? You see that right there? I mean, he won't even... Hey, hi. It was like... So, but I mean, let's be honest. How many of you men would understand and probably say you probably would fit into that characteristic of probably being a workaholic? You work and you work and you work, and then guess what? And women, if that fits you too, get it up there. So, I mean, we just keep working. I want you to hear me. God said, hey, I'm going to let you work for 6 days, but I'm giving you a day of what? Rest, because you need rest. So when you rest, are you resting in the Lord or are you resting in fear? See, a lot of times we keep working because we're afraid of getting behind. We're afraid of getting so far behind that we'll never catch up. Well, I remember that when I first started doing the sheep farming thing, I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, I have worked like 40 hours here, and I'm still doing all the stuff at the church. And God, Dad, I'm not getting anything done. And he goes, Daniel, you're on a farm. You're never going to have it all done. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll just put this one off. I'll put all 10 of those, I'll get to it. I still got fences to be built. I don't have to have them built today. So I look out there, I'm like, there's going to be one day a fence there when I'm good and ready. But now I don't have to stress. I don't have to make everything that's not done in my life a stress to get it done. Are you resting in the Lord so that He can give you strength to do what you need to do for your family? Or are you resting in fear? A lot of us say, well, I'm not really afraid. I'm not talking about like arachnophobia, scared of spiders or something like that. I'm talking about just a fear of like, what if I don't get everything done? What if I don't have this? What if I don't? With all the what ifs are fears that you just don't want to call them a fear. Elijah rested in fear. That's why he kept running. He ran another 40 days. God gave him all the strength he needed to face Jezebel, and he ran 40 more days. You see, the purpose of resting is to receive that strength so that you can face your enemy. Why else did God feed him? See, God did not provide food and rest so that Elijah could continue to run in fear from the one he already conquered. Did you hear me? God didn't feed Elijah so that he could continue to run away from the one he's already defeated. If you're running in fear, you're running from the one you've already beat. Rest and then return to the work God gives you. He needed rest. Okay, you ran 24 hours, you made your point, rest. We got work to do. We got work to do. We got a church to build. We got work to do. We got teaching to teach. Come on, let's go. We got work to do. Ephesians 2:10, for we are His workmanship, created in Christ to do good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God has prepared good works for every single one of you. There's a work that God has for every single one of you. And so many people says, well, Daniel, I just don't think I can do that. I'm afraid. What if I get rejected? What if? I don't know enough. And we have 100 million excuses of why we don't do what God has called us and created us to do. And you know what I hear the most nowadays? I'm too busy. What if God was too busy for you? See, He's not. But that's our excuse all the time. I'm too busy. Come on. Right? I'm too busy. I'm too busy. Then there's some things in your life that needs to be cut out of your life. All right, so let me take you to Ephesians chapter 19, verse 9. Okay, so when he went there, he went into a cave and he spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and he said, what are you doing here, Elijah? I want you to think about this. He ran. I mean, he's like, I'm running for my life. One, he's tired of running after 24 hours. He said, God just killed me. God didn't. He fed him. So he goes, okay, I feel strong. I feel ready. He runs 40 days. He crawls into a hole in a mountain. And God says, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Sometimes I wish God would just speak to us like that. Slap us upside the head and say, what are you doing? What are you doing here? Why did you run 40 days away from what we got? We got to go back. Now it's going to be 41 days going back. What are you doing? This wasn't like, hey, buddy, this was God's correction. What are you doing here? I love how Elijah answers, because he answers like so many of us. I have been zealous for you, God. Maybe we don't say it like that with the zealous. We're like, I don't use that word. God, don't I come to church? Don't I show up? Didn't I do this? Didn't I sing praises? Didn't I put a couple of dollars in the offering plate? God, didn't I do this? Didn't I do? You know what, God? I ran the bounce house for a couple of hours yesterday. God, that should count for something. Amen. Come on. I even had somebody says that they were looking for another church. Is there any other churches in the community that are looking for new members? Because after doing the bounce house, I think I need out. The same person who said that this morning put his arm around me and said, hey, isn't it awesome? Isn't it so cool that we get to go to church here? You weren't saying that yesterday. So what I'm wanting you to, so here's what he's saying is he's like, I have been zealous for you, Lord. For the children, all of the children of Israel, they've forsaken your covenant. They tore down your altars. They killed your prophets. I alone am left, and they seek my life. That is a hogwash of lies right there. He left the revival party. When the whole children of Israel gave their lives back to God, they were the ones who killed the prophets. The prophets can't seek his life. They're dead. Remember, there's 100 prophets hidden in the caves? He's not the only one left. See, what happens is when you run in fear, fear begins to tell you the narrative, and you start believing the lies. Ever happened to you? Start running in fear, and fear starts telling you the narrative of your life. You're not good enough. You're going to be rejected. People are going to quit you. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And then you begin to believe all kinds of lies that fear keeps telling you. I want to tell you what this cave represents. I want you to stop hiding in a cave first. Just because there's a hole in the ground doesn't mean you should crawl in it. I mean, I know that's just common sense, but isn't that pretty practical too? Like if you just walk by and there's just a hole in the ground and just go straight down, are you just going to jump in it? But we do that spiritually. That's what depression and discouragement, see, I want you to understand what the cave represents. Depression. It represents discouragement. It represents exhaustion. It represents fear. It represents frustration. You know, when you're exhausted or you're frustrated or you're afraid or you're angry or you're depressed or discouraged, then we want to just crawl in a hole and live there. We want to feel sorry for ourselves. We want everybody else to feel sorry for us too. I'm the last one. I'm the only one left. God, no one loves you but me, and now everybody wants to kill me and I just want to die. Well, boo-hoo. God did not feel sorry for him. No one really. God didn't go, oh man, I didn't know how hard it was for you. It's kind of like, yeah, what about all the things that you have forgotten? We'll get to that in just a minute. Zealous, I've been zealous for you. I already said that we do the same. Now check this out. Just because there's a cave doesn't mean that you need to get into it, right? But I want you to know what the cave, I told you what it represented. It represents depression, discouragement, frustration, all of these emotions that you have going on in your life. When you jump in the cave, you decide that you're going to live in it. You hear me? When you decide, I'm going to allow discouragement to win, now you're in the cave. You're in the cave. When you say, you know what, I'm depressed and that's just how my life is, you're in a cave. You know what, I'm so mad, I'm ready to quit everything and I'm just gonna stay mad. You're in a cave. The moment that you allow your emotion to run the show of your life, you're in the cave. And I'm telling you to stop hiding in a cave. You see, the real problem is that Elijah had forgotten all that God had done for him. Think about it. All the victories that he had before he ran, he outran a chariot, he prayed and God gave rain, he prayed and fire came down from heaven, 450 priests, prophets of Baal were destroyed in a single night, and all the children of Israel returned to God. That sounds like a pretty good day. I mean, wouldn't you? But see, when you remember all that God has done for you, you will not be in the cave. So let me show you that. So he forgot all these things, right? But what about when God has, you remember, how many of you would say that there was a time that God made a way when there was no way in your life? That God made a way when there was no way. How many of you? Come on, hands up, be proud of that moment. Okay, so all of you have that, right? How many of you would also say that there was a time that you were the prodigal child running from God and he brought you back home? Right? Okay? How many of you have known that he left a 99 to go get your selfish little turkey out? Right? Right? I mean, there's some times you're like, look, God had to leave the 99 over there because I was over here stuck in a briar patch. I jumped in a hole and I couldn't get out. How many of you know that God chased you down when you were unworthy of being chased, and yet he came anyways? You see what I'm saying? So what happens is this. The cave is for those who forget that God did those things. When you remember, you know what? God came for me. God stood for me. God fight for me. God healed me. God protected me. God saved me. We're not going to be in a cave because we know who he is. So what is it that God has done for you that you have forgotten? I mean, if we're honest, there's probably about 100 little things, probably 100 times 100 little things that God has done for you that we probably just slipped our mind. I want to give you an assignment. I want you to get a notebook out, and I want you to write down everything that you can remember that God has ever done for you. It'll blow your mind how many pages you're going to fill. You're going to start writing these down, and all of a sudden, you're going to find a strength that you didn't even know was there. Because you're going to be like, God did this. Oh, yeah, he did. Oh, he did this, and he did this, and he did this. And all of a sudden, before long, you're going to be blown away by all the things that God has done for you. And you're not going to be sitting in a cave any longer. The cave is for those who want to forget. Maybe you don't even want to forget, but you just did. So I want to say this. The last thing, well, not the last thing. I got a couple things, but here, stop hiding from the one you've already conquered. I love this. So we stop hiding in a cave. We're going to stop going to emotional depression and discouragement and frustration and exhaustion. We're going to stop doing that because we're going to remember. So how you stop hiding in a cave is you remember what God's done for you. That's the antidote. I don't want to be in a cave, then I need to remember God. Okay? Now I want to tell you this. Stop hiding from the one you've already conquered. Here's what's amazing. This is not an isolated event. Fear has won many battles in many people's lives. Remember the disciples in the boat with Jesus? He was sleeping. The storm came. The water was crashing over the sides of the boat. And the disciples were like, Jesus, we're going to die. Now you need to remember that the disciples were experienced fishermen. They've been in storms before. So if a fisherman who's experienced in storms is telling you they're going to die, you're going to die. So they're like, shake it, Jesus. We're going to die. Don't you care? He's sleeping. He knows who he is. They don't know who he is. So he gets up and he says, be still. The wind and the waves listened to his command and they ceased. The disciples are looking at him and he goes, why are you so afraid? Why are you so afraid? Fear had defeated them. They didn't even know who they had in the boat. Don't you know who's in your heart? You don't just have them in the boat. You have them inside of you. Jesus, the reigning king who's never lost a battle, is living inside of all who believe in him. You already have the victory. So you have Jesus, and so he's like, don't you know who's in the boat? So I'm asking you, don't you know who's in your heart? You see, Elijah was hiding from death. Jezebel said, I'm going to kill you, and he's hiding. He's hiding because she promised to kill him. I want you to check this out. This is kind of a neat little biblical rundown here, all right? So, in 1 Kings chapter 19, that's where we are right now. In 1 Kings chapter 20, there was a great war. Many soldiers died. Not Elijah. In chapter 21 of 1 Kings, Naboth was murdered, but not Elijah. In chapter 22, Ahab the king died, but not Elijah. In 2 Kings chapter 1, 100 soldiers came, 50 at a time, to come capture him, arrest him, and bring him to Jezebel. They all died because they were going to touch him. They all died. 100 soldiers died, but Elijah did not. In chapter 2, Elijah was taken by chariots of angels to heaven, and he still didn't have a physical death. So when God says you're not going to die, you're not going to die. You see, he ran his entire life. In 2 Kings chapter 9, Jezebel died. Elijah didn't. You see, Christ defeated death on the cross. So if you're worried about dying, don't. We've already beat it. I didn't beat it. Jesus beat it. But because we have Jesus, we beat it. You get it? Now listen to this. I want to read this passage to you. In John chapter 11, 25, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? If you believe it, give God some praise today. See, listen to this. He says, he who believes in me, whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Here's what I'm going to tell you. When you close your eyes here, you open your eyes in glory. When you take your last breath here, you breathe your first breath in glory. For those who believe in God, though you die, you will live. You already conquered death, so stop letting it run your life. You see, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul said, so when the corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass, saying, death has been swallowed up in victory. Death was swallowed up by victory. O death, where's your sting? O hell, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, but the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. You see, why are we afraid of what we've already defeated? You see, people say, Daniel, how did you cope when your son passed away at the age of 14? This. He didn't lose. See, a lot of people say, oh, you lost. One, I didn't. He was not lost. I know exactly where my son is. And he didn't lose any battle. I hate when people say, oh, they lost the battle to cancer. No, they won! They won! They beat it because they're now in glory. Hell can't hold you. Death can't hold you. I know exactly where he is. He won. Philippians chapter 1, verse 21, it says, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. Do you believe that? I mean, when I read Scripture, I used to, before my son ever got sick, I hardly ever preached on heaven. I hardly ever did. And now it's all I ever want to talk about because that's what it's all about. Whatever happens on earth, whatever. If I suffer, I suffer. If it's hard, whatever. Because I'm looking forward to all of eternity. I've already conquered all the things I ever worried about. I don't have to worry about any of them. For me to live is Christ. So if I'm going to live, I'm preaching Christ. If I die, I get to be with Him. Woo! I mean, man, talk about a win-win. He says, if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit for my labor, yet what shall I choose? Paul's like, man, I don't know what to do. I want to die so I can go home. But if I feel like I need to live so that I can help out the church a little longer. So let me show you the last bit of this story. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 15. Then the Lord said to him, this is tough. So he's in the cave feeling sorry for himself. Now God speaks to him. So remember that, well, what are you doing here? He goes, oh, Lord, I've been zealous for your kingdom. I've done all these things for you, and now I just want to die. This is how the Lord replies. This is the Lord's reply. Go, return on your, go back. Get up. You're going to go face what you just walked away from. Go return. Go return the way you came, the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, anoint Hazael, king over Assyria, and then you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, king of Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, Malo, you shall anoint as a prophet in your place. Did you catch that? If you keep hiding, you're going to lose your position to someone else who will do it. See, Elijah, amazing prophet. Don't want to take anything away from that, but I want you not to miss what happened here. See, all the things, God doesn't need me for this ministry. Living Water doesn't need me. It only needs God. And if there's a point in my life where I begin to hide in fear and stop obeying God and I start running from all of my problems, God will find someone else to do this. He doesn't need me. I think a lot of times people, because of fear, I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, and you keep telling no to God long enough, He'll stop asking. I can't tell you how many times I've had people like, man, I feel like I was supposed to do that, but I'm just too afraid. God did not give you a spirit of fear. He didn't give you a spirit of timidity. He gave you a spirit of His Son, Jesus, who already defeated every problem that you got. When I look at this, I don't want to ever be that. I don't want to ever do that. I don't want to ever find myself in a place where I say no to God. I don't want to ever say, God, I'm not good enough to do what you asked me to do. God will give me everything that I need to do what anything. People say, well, that you're different. You're you. I'm like, what does that even mean? Well, I'm not a preacher. I'm not this or I'm not that. I'm a person. If you cut me, my blood, guess what, is red, just like yours. My feelings get hurt just like yours. My toes get stepped on just like yours. I have fear just like you. I have grief just like you. I feel everything that you've felt. You feel everything that I've ever felt. Stop using excuses when it comes to serving the King of Kings. There's no greater thing that we could ever do is say, God, I'm just going to try. Good. He'll do everything else. Just be faithful. Just be faithful. Let God use you. I love this quote. Living in fear is not living at all. It's just dying before your time. Whew. Come on now. Church, we need that one. Don't we? How many of you have struggled with fear? You haven't done something, maybe God told you to do something and you're just too afraid to do it. Come on. Maybe not now. How many of you have done this at some point in your life? Probably every one of us, right? Okay. Everybody else is lying. They'll have to deal with that one later. See, God's perfect love, in 1 John 4:18 it says, God's perfect love drives out all fear. If you're living in fear, then you have allowed fear to have more power over the love of God, which is more powerful. What happens is that we allow things that are weaker to have control over the things that are stronger. You hearing me, right? If you're living in fear, it's because you're letting that happen. Fear's already been defeated. Death has already been defeated. Discouragement has already been defeated. Depression has already been defeated. Your frustrations are already defeated. Everything that you're dealing with, all the emotions that you have in your life, has already been defeated. If they're running your life, it's because you're not allowing God to run your life. So I want you to bow your heads this morning. Maybe some of you today are dealing with some depression. Maybe you find yourself in a cave.